side of there is not necessarily unique with the way that you're doing it, and then you're actually offering, um, you're actually going to be bringing in other instructors, so that it's not, your course and your community will be able to leverage each other, to promote each other, etc. So I think that concept is great, and that's how you guys. That's your USP, in my opinion. You have the tests, you have the results. You're offering a section for community testing, and you also have this other way of monetizing that thing. So, and it's something that I could also do as well on what ranks. Um, it's just a matter of,
Well, the
is there enough pie? I think OMG and Cotton Grammar and Derek, those two competing things, tell us that there's enough pie. It's just a matter of how do we get out of our own way so that we're not competing for the same piece.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of SEOs like Ahrefs is making what 40 million a year or more.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of SEOs. So we've barely touched the market. And the other consideration is your workflow. How do you want to operate day in and day out going forward?
Yeah.
Because you're going to go through those repetitive motions a million times to make sure that you got a good workflow.
Yeah. Keeping your own platform updated and going to Facebook, and maybe you have a Slack and all that stuff. That can be a pain in the ass, and it turns into work. I'm sure you guys know it's why you went with the way you did it. So
Well, for workflow, nothing beats custom because you get what you want. When
yeah.
you're picking off the shelf platforms, you have to buy into their workflows, which maybe that works, maybe that doesn't, and you really have to evaluate it.
That makes sense. All right, we are live. Everything's working, so we're good to go.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody, to episode 43 of SEO Fight Club. Today, I thought we would go over some tests, but at the same time, I got a lot of inquiries from the last time we showed tests. How do you make these? How do you read these? How do I understand these? Those types of questions. And I know that in your new role over at SIA, you're going to be spinning up a lot of testing. So I thought now's a good time to talk about the pitfalls of SEO testing, and we can explain some of the common problems and kind of how to read and evaluate tests and how to build and make tests. So that's my goal with the topic for today. So we'll dive into the boilerplate here. So IMG, I want to let everybody know we're not sitting idle. We plan a very big pivot because we have been taking feedback from the community, and in secret and quietly, we've been trying to figure out how to act on that feedback. And our pivot, our response to that feedback is going to be massive. So hang on to your socks. Kyle, you want any comments on our pivot?
The biggest thing is that it actually works. That's actually been the really nice thing, is that kind of testing it through all different, phones and desktops and Huja widgets. Actually having a platform that works is going to be very nice, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it's like all of our problems are practically gone now as far as like technical issues. We still have other problems in life, but those are separate. SEO this week, Clint, what can people expect?
This is a great one. We talk about some link building methods, including podcasting for link building. Not only doing your own, but actually going out and getting exposure on other people's podcasts. Kind of like what Ted and Kyle do when they go to conferences, but this is the light version where you can sit in your house. So that's cool. And then you also get to see the joys of doing a show live. If you ever wondered if we do this show live, this show guarantees it. It proves that we do it live.
No, we're totally scripted.
This is a very scripted show. I'm scripted from the laundry room of somebody's home right now.
Nice.
This is all production value.
Very cool. So yeah, if you haven't seen SEO this week, it is an amazing resource. Clint goes through all the articles of the week and boils it down to the 5 or 10 that matter most. And it's a huge time saver. I used to spend dozens of hours every week combing through articles, trying to find new information, new research. And I got all that time back when I started watching SEO this week. So be sure to check it out and subscribe. So our topic today is the pitfalls of SEO testing. And in past episodes, I've shown some of my testing, which came with a specification on how the test is constructed. And so I wanted to go into that and talk about making tests and where I commonly fail and drop the ball in tests. So this particular test we're looking at right now, we're looking to see if the number of keywords in title tags is a factor. And so the first thing I do is I try to figure out what my control cases, what my control cases are going to be. And so we have this syntax that's very HTML-like, just to block out, the parts of the experiment, and the control, defining the controls is one of the parts. So in the control, there's a control head block, and I want the program to automatically put in canonical tags. I want a title, and I want it to have 19 random words in the title, fairly long and definitely unique. I want a meta description. This is 40 words, random words, so very unique. And then in the body of the controls, there's a settings block also where you specify the modes and how much content. So mine are typically 2,000 words of random alpha. So just random letters to make up words instead of random words or alphanumeric words or Latin. So there are different modes that you can use in your testing. I typically use random alpha because for some reason I tend to get better indexing. I think somehow it plays on very aggressive uniqueness. And so that's where I've been playing a lot lately. In the control body, there's this unused sentences. So in my settings block, I'll typically say I want my pages to be 2,000 words and comprise those of 22 word sentences. And because it doesn't divide evenly, there's usually a short sentence at the very end. You can refer to sentences by number. So I could say sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, but any sentences that don't get referred to are wildcarded with this unused sentences. So this, for all practical purposes, is putting all sentences at the top of my page. And then below all that content, I have all these shared keyword, 10 times here. So what the heck is that about? Why on earth would you make a control like that? Well, to understand that, we'll have to look at the test cases, and then these patterns will make more sense. And then ultimately, I have this control score. This is for calculating the correlation of the test case with ranking. Since we're measuring keywords and title tags, and my control has no shared keywords in it, so 0 keywords in the title tag, so I scored it. All right. So now we'll look at a test case. So we're still doing a number of keywords in the title tags, but this is our first test case we want to look at. One match in title, score 1. So we have one shared keyword in the title, and it has a score of 1. So that's how we're getting those correlations mapped. But then we have this, one word, one word, one word, one word, one word, one word, one. What the heck is that all about? And then again, we have our unused sentences. And here we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 shared keywords here. We had 10 in the controls, we have 9 here, and we have all this word garbage going on. So what's going on? So if I go back, there's a context here of keyword density. So we have word count on a page, and we have our keyword matches on a page. And keyword density is the ratio of your keyword matches to the overall word count. And if you are not careful in your SEO testing, you are going to accidentally test keyword density a lot. It's the #1 mistake in SEO testing. And so what I'm doing here is I'm having a 19-word title, I'm having a 40-word meta description, I'm having 10 keyword matches on page, and 2,000 words and sentences for body content. I have very exact word counts, very exact keyword density, because this is not a keyword density test. So here I have a shared keyword, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 words with the shared keyword. Together, that's 19. So back here we had 19 words. Here we have 18 random words and 1 shared keyword. So
and Ted, those words, the word times 1x, that's your random word or your random alpha.
Yes. So the software will actually take the specification and will render it into HTML pages, and it'll render it into different websites with the same experiment, and it'll deploy it to all my different test sites concurrently. So we'll run the same test 10 times in parallel and see how the experiment does across 10 different websites running the same experiment. And so what I'm doing when I do all of this weirdness is I've kept 10 keyword matches on pages. So my controls had 10 keyword matches. My test cases have 10 keyword matches. My title had 19 words on the control. It has 19 words in the test case. So I'm keeping that keyword density and the match count static. I'm not letting that be the thing that changes. Because if you're not careful about that, you won't be testing keywords in the title tag. You'll be testing keyword density on page.
Where are you telling it in the specification they only use 2,000 words?
I don't have that here, but there's a block at the top called settings. And there's a word count, and you could specify any number of words. And I typically set it to 2,000. So in IMG, if you look at the specifications, you'll see examples in the settings block. So let's look at another one. So we're still doing keywords in the title tags, but I went to the very last test in the test group where I'm doing 10 matches in the title. Since I have 10 keywords in the title tag, I score it as a 10 so I can do the correlation. And I'm doing this weird thing. Why am I doing this? Why am I going shared keyword, random word, shared keyword, random word? Well, it turns out that if you just put your keywords back to back to back to back, you get uniqueness problems in your titles and meta descriptions by having the 4 keywords be too similar to the 5 keywords be too similar to the 6 keywords, and you get indexation problems. When you put in a random word in between, you get very good uniqueness. So I don't want to test repeated keywords impact on indexation. I want to test the number of keywords in title tags. So I made my title 19 words long so I could have something in between each of my keywords so they wouldn't be back to back and cause duplicate content issues. So that's why I did that. And it's another reason, why do I have a meta description at all? because when it's unique, it indexes better. And then since this was the last test, all of my keywords are in the title. But on the controls, we had 10 shared keywords down here, but we moved them all one at a time into the title. So we'll have a 9 matches in title, 8 matches, 7 matches. We'll have test cases for each of those, where the only thing we're doing is shuffling from the keywords on the page into the title. So any questions on this one before I go into like another kind of test we do?
I think probably the only question left is how you're coming up with that score. You got score 10.0.
Yeah, if there are 10 keywords in the title for this test case, it's a score of 10.
So
yeah,
so if 1, 2 is 2, 3 is 3.
Yeah, if I go back here, there's 1 match in the title, score of 1.
Okay.
Because ultimately, I'm going to take this test case and say, oh, this test case had a rank of 3 and a score of 1, and it had a rank of 6 and a score of 9. And because I have that data, I can correlate whether or not the results appear to be sorted by this factor. So the score is the amount of whatever it is you're measuring.
So when you get your table and your table is going to tell you essentially which page is ranking where, right? And then
it's
this one is more valuable or versus. Okay, I got it now.
Yeah, exactly. But you need this data to do the math.
Okay. And if you're doing a test that had 100 pages, for example, then your score would go all the way up to 100 or whatever.
Yeah, if you're incrementing by 1.
Okay.
And I'll show you tests where we're not using score, and I'll show you a test where we're not incrementing by 1. So keywords and zones. This is a very common type of SEO test. You're saying, I wonder if, the fig caption HTML tag is a ranking factor if I put a keyword in it. That's a keyword in a zone. And so there's a million keywords and zones tests out there. It's very common. So when I make my controls for this, again, I wanted a fixed length title because I'm worried about that keyword density. So I'm going to have a 10-word title and again, a 40 random word meta description. I've got all my unused sentences just dumped at the top of the body. And at the very bottom of the document, I have my shared keyword. And people often ask me, why do you do that? Why not put the shared keyword first? Because it could be possible that having your keyword near the top of the document is a factor. And I don't want to accidentally test that if it is. So I put my shared keyword at the bottom. So if it is a factor, it gets the worst possible score it can on it. And again, since we're measuring keywords and zones, I don't have my keyword in a zone, and there's nothing really to measure. All of my tests are going to have 1 keyword. So I just give everything a score of 0, and I'm not going to care about correlation. What I want to find from these tests is relatively which tag ranks higher than which other tag. So looking at a test case, here's a zone is the title tag, so keywords in that zone. We don't care about correlation because we're not measuring amounts of things. We're putting 1 keyword in the title tag. If you remember before, I had a 10-word title tag. So now I'm got my shared keyword in there and 9 words, keeping that word count fixed. Don't want to vary the keyword density. You will spoil the test if you overlook that. Same thing, 40-word meta description, unused sentences right at the top. And I put a word down here. So why'd you do that? That used to be a shared keyword. Why the random word? Well, because I'm using up one of the title words, which were 10 up here. And I don't want 2 shared keywords because then I'm mucking with keyword density. And I don't want the word count to change, so I had to add a random word there. I'm keeping the word count and the keyword density exactly the same so that I'm fairly sure I'm testing the thing I think I'm testing. So here's another zone. Again, the score is 0 because all we care about is where do these rank relative to each other. Keyword and H1 tag, 10 words in title, 40 words in meta description, unused sentences. And look at that, I put my H1 at the bottom. Why would you do that? Well, again, if it's at the top, we might be testing the position and document factor versus just the keyword being in the H1. So if position and document is a factor, I want to get the worst score for that factor I possibly can. So I put my H1 at the bottom. So you got to think like that to not spoil the test.
That one's clever. Nice one.
Thank you. Keywords in the meta keywords tag, again, score 0, 10 words in title. This one gets a little bit iffy because does word count matter if it's inside of another tag? I don't know. We got a little gray on this one, but we're going to let it slide for science. So we have an extra tag on the page, and if number of HTML tags is a factor, we might have slightly skewed this. But we put our shared keyword in the meta keywords tag. Perhaps I could have done this test better by putting a meta keywords in every test case and in the control cases and just used a random word in it. That probably would have been a little bit better science. But I know how this one ends, so don't worry, it didn't spoil the test. And then my unused sentences down here, and we had a shared keyword down here, but I didn't put one word. You know why? Because it's right here. There wasn't a word deficit, so I didn't have to add a word here. When you count them all up between the controls and the other test cases, we get the same count except for meta name keywords content. That's a game changer. So this one, not as pristine as the other ones, but I'd let this one slide. Good enough. So any questions on the creating tests in zones? Seems pretty straightforward to me.
On the HTML one or the H1 tag test there, you had unused sentences and then the H1 underneath that. When the software makes that test page, is it literally putting all the content and then the H1 is underneath all of that?
Yes, it's going to render it in the order you put it in.
Would that change? Would there be a difference if that H1 is above the content versus below?
There might, and that's why I put it at the bottom. The theory out there is that position in the document matters. I'm not convinced that it does, but just in case I'm wrong on that, I want to get the worst possible score on that if it is real. So if it's a nothing burger, we don't need to worry about it either way. If it's real, then we want it at the bottom. So the safe bet, put it at the bottom until you know better.
And to know better would be to do another test with it on top.
Yes, and you will find that when you start testing, just about every test you do leads to about 2 or 3 more tests you need to do.
Let's say you wanted to put it in the middle. So you do unused sentences, H1, and then unused sentences again, and the software is smart enough to figure out the
No, that would actually double your content. If you wanted it somewhere in the middle, at the top, you'd say sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, however many you want above. Then you'd put in shared keyword, and then below you'd say unused sentences. So the rest of them I didn't use, just throw them all here.
Okay.
Because you have a pretty much an unknown but finite amount of sentences, because in the settings you're saying I want 2,000 words and use 22 words per sentence. And so, you could do the math and figure it out. You have some number of sentences and a short sentence at the end. You can refer to them by number. And any ones you don't refer to are still in the unused sentence bucket.
Okay, makes sense.
So this is another type of test where I wanted to take a stab at measuring page render time as a factor, because everybody keeps telling me, Ted, page speed, it's a ranking factor. Well, we can test that. So setting up my controls, this time I'm using a 7-word title. I got 40 words in my meta description, got my unused sentences at the top and a shared keyword and a score of 0. And we will be doing correlation here because this one we're measuring units of things. So my first test case, 200 million iterations. And we give it a score of 200 because I don't want to write out gigantic numbers. So 200 is equivalent to 200 million iterations. And so 7-word title again. I haven't launched this test yet, but I need to fix it because 20-word meta description, 40-word meta description. I just tested keyword density. Number one mistake in SEO testing, if you're not careful, you will end up accidentally testing keyword density. And I just did it here. That's how easy it is. So good thing is I haven't launched this test yet. I'll go in and fix that. Unused sentences, shared keyword, and I put in this script. Well, what the hell is this? I thought we were doing page render time. Well, it turns out you can delay the page render by just counting in JavaScript. So here I'm counting to 200 million. That's why I said 200 million iterations, gave it a score of 200. Counting to 200 million. That's how much delay I'm putting in. Now, in this next test, this is the opposite end, and I'd have test cases in the middle that would gradually approach this amount. So this one is 2 billion iterations. So I'm putting in 2000 for the score, and 7-word title, got to fix the meta description. Unused sentences at the top, shared keyword, and then the script again, but this time I'll be going to 2 billion. And the thing about this test is that 2 billion iterations sounds like a lot, but in a modern computer context, that's about 1.2 seconds of render delay. So this test is going from 0 seconds of rendering delay to 1.2 seconds of rendering delay, with tests in the middle just incrementing by 200 million iterations. So I'll have 10 tests ranging from 0 seconds to 1.2 seconds of render delay. And why did I pick those numbers? Because that doesn't seem like a lot of delay. I happen to know from other tests I've done that at 1.2 seconds of CPU execution time, Googlebot stops watching the page. That's how the Google time exploit works. So if if the page render time is an issue, that's how much time I have to play with it. So I made my test to do that. And once I fix my keyword density problem, I can launch this, and then I should see if page render time is a factor. I should see my controls beat everything because they have no delay. And then I should see my test cases in order ranking below my controls, least delay to most delay. So if we want to say page render time is a factor, I want to see all my no delay controls win, and I want to see all my test cases in order from least to maximum delay. And then I'd put these out there, let Google cook on them for a few days, and then I'd go back and measure the results and see its page render time a ranking factor.
Love it. Good stuff. Let's see the results.
Well, you're going to have to join IMG. These are I have not finished conducting. I have right now I have like 15 different specifications built. I'm trying to get to 20 later today, and then I'll deploy them all. And we're doing a big testing blitz to populate IMG. So these tests are part of that blitz. So other common problems, so like I said in that red text there, the number one thing you need to look out for in SEO testing is accidentally testing keyword density when you don't need to. By far, it's where I trip up the most. It's an extremely common problem. I got kicked out of a different SEO testing group for pointing out these kinds of problems. And, it's real. You can sit there and look at that going, yeah, I see that you got a result, but I think based on how you did it, you might have tested keyword density, and people hate you, and then you're kicked out of the group. Just watch out for it. If you want to be the smartest guy in the room wherever you're talking about SEO testing, and there's like maybe 2 rooms on earth where that happens, just keep that red statement in your pocket. 90% of SEO testing mistakes involve accidentally testing keyword density. And if you look for that problem, if you know to look for that problem, it makes it easier to solve 90% of your testing mistakes.
And it's easier to correct me if I'm wrong. It's easier to identify it if you're using a tool like yours, where everyone can see the specifications versus, hey, I tested this, blah. You know what I mean? So
yeah, but you don't need to use a software like mine. You could do it in just HTML. And
no, I'm talking to identify that. I'm not set up.
Yeah. If you're looking
like
at
if Kyle did it, and he's using his single vario method, how the hell would I know that unless I physically actually found his test pages, which he doesn't? One of the things you don't want to happen. How would I know that he messed up keyword density?
Yeah. And that's a big problem in the SEO testing community, is the lack of a standard specification for testing. And so when I made my software, one of my goals was, let's work on that standard specification. That way I don't have to share my keywords. I don't have to share my test sites. I just share the specification on how I did it.
And to that point, what's nice is then it can be replicated. Is the idea. So let's say you see a test like mine, and I'm not going to show you what I'm doing. You see something somewhere else, you can then plug it into this, and you can start to play with it and see if you can't replicate it. And then you can get independent verification on anything that you see.
Yeah, and you can go back and redo old tests. And see
exactly.
After the changes and stuff. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or if you think I did it wrong, you could tweak what I did and show me.
Yeah, for sure. Which is a good part of it, because you're like, hey, that's interesting. You did this. I just thought of that, so I did it this way. Look at these different results.
Yeah, exactly. So like I mentioned, 90% is accidentally testing keyword density. You should always look for that mistake. I guarantee that'll be the one you find most often. So just always look for it. If you're using HTML, doing it the old school way, you need the right tool set. You need to find a sophisticated text editor that can do word counts of your selection. That way you can verify that the 2,000 word block is in fact 2,000 words. And, so you need to be able to check. So you'd have to have a pretty fancy editor to do it the old school way. Other problems, the keyword in the URL. Let me go back. No, I have it in a forward one. So I'll show you an example of keyword in the URL. But this is a problem because it's a very strong factor. And one of the things I've done is, over the past year is really tested my methods. And I found that putting your shared keyword in very strong zones, SEO factor zones, like in an H1 tag and a title tag and a URL, these are like the strongest SEO factors for relevance there are. And even if you do it fairly across all your controls and all your test cases, it still spoils the test for a decent amount of tests. And we're not entirely sure why, but the leading theory on why that is that Google is putting in a tiny amount of randomness into the search results. And so it's calculating a ranking score, and whatever your page's ranking score is, Google is saying, well, give a random plus or minus 2% to it, just to spice it up. And when you properly eliminate all the variables in your testing, all that you have left is that randomness that Google's putting into the scoring. And it's a teeny tiny amount, but that teeny tiny amount seems to be percentage based. So when you fairly share a keyword in a URL or an H1 or in a title tag, that plus or minus 2% of that score might outweigh the factor you're trying to measure, which would ruin the test. So by not fairly sharing those factors, you actually get the signal on the weaker factors you're trying to measure. So if you're trying to measure something that's sufficiently weak, then fairly sharing factors would spoil the test. Now, are you going to encounter that? That's maybe 8% of the time you have a fairly shared factor you shouldn't have. So where this is 90, this is maybe 8. And poor indexation can ruin a test. Checking your results too soon. If it's not done cooking in Google, you will get not final results. And so,
is there an amount of time you like, Ted, for yours?
Well, the first thing is, if you're testing across 10 websites, is it indexed on all 10? Because if you're sitting there hitting search in Google going, I'm ranking, I'm not, I'm ranking, I'm not, I'm ranking, I'm ranking, I'm ranking, I'm not, it's probably not on all of the servers out on Google. There's a propagation phase where Google analyzes your content and lets the whole grid know of its answers. And if those answers haven't propagated to all of Google's servers, you'll see things like I'm ranking, I'm not, I'm ranking, I'm not. But once you're ranking across all the servers, once that data has all been calculated and propagated across all of Google's servers, then you'll see 100% ranking across the board. And so if you check too soon, some of your sites might have not been propagated, and you'll get weird results and changing results. And usually the thing to do is to just wait, just wait a few more days. Typically, we tend to see decent test results within a week. Sometimes it takes a little longer, sometimes it happens faster. But looking at the indexation rate is usually the first step on, are we ready to look at results? Indexing methods can spoil your test. If you go to some indexing service and you don't know how they're getting you indexed, they could be generating backlinks to your test pages. And that would be a fairly shared factor that spoils the test. Those backlinks could get traffic. They could get bot traffic. They could get human CTR, who knows? So you have to be careful about your indexing methods. Sharing the test keywords with people. I know there are groups out there that do that. I don't recommend it. that would be akin to a biologist saying, here, handle my petri dishes. Sure, you can do it. It doesn't make for the best science. And then, of course, not testing if things you do are spoiling the test. So you need to test your methods. If you're not testing your methods, then you don't know if you're doing something wrong. So brings me to testing my methods. We make tests for that. Same thing. So no match headings. I had an experiment. I was trying to look at factor diversity, and for some reason I had headings that needed to be on page but didn't need to have the keyword in the heading. And I got weird results. And I was like, okay, something here isn't adding up. I think I need to test these headings that don't use the keyword. So I made a control case that has no headings. And then we have the one heading here with a keyword and 9 words in the body. So 10 words overall. Our unused sentences at the top to give it some bulk. And then our one keyword match. And like I mentioned before about the file name, in a previous video, we talk about testing, and I mentioned the 3 keyword method and that most testers are using the 2 keyword method. 3 keyword method means you have a shared keyword. That's what you search for in Google. But then you have a test keyword, which is unique to the test case. That's how you identify the individual test. And the 3rd keyword is the folder keyword, which you basically make so that you get the shared keyword out of the file name, out of the URL. And that's 3 keyword method. Sometimes we want to test a keyword in a URL, in which case we'd replace the folder name with the shared keyword. But in general, we don't. And you won't see this clause in most tests because this right here is the default. 3 keyword method just happens if you don't even put this tag in.
I'm confused.
It takes some getting used to, but when you go out and look at legacy testing, most of it is 2 keyword testing where there's a test case keyword and a shared keyword across the test so that you can see how all the test cases rank. And we just wanted to remove the variable of having the shared keyword in the URL because you need a unique URL for each one. And so one common practice was putting the shared keyword in the URL and usually in a folder name. And that's a bad thing to do because you're fairly sharing a factor.
Yeah.
So when you put in a different, a secondary shared keyword that you're not actually using in the experiment, you get that out of the URL.
So you get it out of the URL, and it also allows you to use your domains for multiple tests, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
does it output? I'm sorry. Does it output the software give you the name so that you know what to look for in your?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So these, and I'll show you an output in a second here, or part of an output. So the names appear as in the reports. So we have 10 headings. So before I had 1 heading, here I have 10. Obviously, I would have test cases going from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the last one. So it's the same thing. The unused sentences, 1 keyword on the page, but now I have 10 headings that only have random words, no keywords in them, and a score of 10. So now we're looking at the output. So we have our test names here. So 1 heading, here's 10 headings. Here's each of our 10 sites. We can see that site 9 has indexing issues. And we can see that because it has no rankings on site 9 for the test cases. but the other ones are pretty good, and that's good enough. We had 200 total test pages, an index rate of 89.5%. And what we found is that every test page that had headings without the keyword in the headings beat every control page that also had the keyword and no head. Those headings without keywords are spoiling tests. And that's what I mean about testing my methods. I should not be having headings that don't have the keyword because they are a minor factor. Every single case of a test case that had a heading without the keyword in it ranked higher than all of the controls. So those headings that didn't have keyword matches, they were a spoiling effect on my other test.
All right.
And that's all I have. That's the pitfalls of SEO testing. So Kyle, what percentage of SEOs do you think, caught on to all of this and are going to apply it in their daily life?
2.
2% or 2 SEOs?
2 SEOs. Outside of you, it's me and Clint. That's
All right, let us know in the chat if Kyle is wrong. How many people watching the show are testers? Say I'm a tester in chat. I want to know.
Ooh, don't ask questions you don't know the answer to. That's trial attorney 101.
Oh yeah. Well, I won't be surprised if it's close to 0, but I would be surprised if there are 3 or 4 watching. So what do you think, Kyle? What are some of the problem spots you've found?
One of the biggest things is indexation, like getting the pages to index. Because there's especially last year during a lot of the updates that were going on, the biggest problem I had was actually I feel like March and April. Actually, both this year and last year were just pages just refused to index, and there wasn't anything you could do at all. So that was a bummer because that really slows you down in terms of I've got all these ideas, I want to run all these things, and you just can't get it going. But the time factor involved in doing all of these things, it's one thing to say hey, we're going to launch it and then we're going to wait for everything to index and we're going to feel pretty good about it. Maybe 2-3 weeks. 2-3 weeks is a long time. That's where you're just kind of hanging out and chilling and, hoping that you're not spoiling anything in the process or you didn't mess anything up, because it took effort to get it going and tinkering with it and figuring it out and then finally setting it out there into the interwebs. It's a bummer when you work on something for a couple of weeks and it just doesn't work. So yeah. The time factor involved is a big part of it.
Yeah, I make mistakes in probably 1 out of 3 experiments where I have to redo them,
easily.
You find your biggest time thing is getting them indexed? Because you talked before, you're actually going to Search Console and manually submitting them. So,
well, you have to wait for Google to do its thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So even if you manually submit all of the sites, you still have to wait for Google to process them, and that's typically a week.
Right.
So if you made a mistake, you won't be able to try again for another week. So
would it be easier if you just
weeks?
Are you submitting the actual URLs or are you submitting the sitemap? Because the software creates a sitemap, right? So you just give the sitemap to Google and let it do it, or?
Yeah. I've had my best luck indexing test pages by creating HTML indexes that link to the test pages, submitting that HTML index. And then once they're indexed, you go in and delete the links out of the index. You don't delete the index page, because what we've also found in testing is that if you just 404 that page, it's still going to pass phantom link juice for quite a long time. So if you want to remove the influence of those backlinks, you remove the links from the page, but you let the page exist. And that's another way you can spoil a test. Well, I guess Kyle's in luck for an early lunch. unless we have some questions.
One question was, where can they get the tool? It seems like the obvious question.
It's currently in closed beta. I imagine it'll be in open beta through IMG by the next updated version. There's 2 or 3 bugs that I know of, and we're planning to get it into the whole community's hands because this is science. So it'll be a free tool for IMG members.
Makes sense. Ryan wanted to know, on the IMG logo, shouldn't the slash be on the other side since there's no need for a closing IMG image tag?
Yeah, we were being clever. We thought that the world isn't using the close tags, so we will.
Artistic license in the code is allowed.
That's true. And that looks like that's it for questions.
Awesome. So what do you guys have planned for future testing?
I'm actually going to go and, because I like to re-verify stuff, so I'm going to go through all the old SIA tests. I'll run those, and then I do the same with the IMG stuff, and that's for me. And the other tests that I'm doing are all non-scientific. I'm doing tests in real life using software, so SEO Autopilot, Ranker X, all that stuff, and seeing which combinations of what tool or can it by themselves, can they rank and stuff. So that's kind of where I'm going for my own personal testing.
I'm putting a series together on image ranking, like getting images to rank better, just for the because there's the standard stuff that everybody talks about, the volume and image all and stuff like that. But I want to run through and see what else can we do, to get stuff to move up. It's not, a huge thing within the SEO world, and so I kind of thought it'd be kind of fun. There might be a lot that a lot of people don't know, a lot that on how it works. I got this idea actually from James Dooley. I don't know if you know him, but he's big with the Chiang Mai SEO crowd, and he had some ideas, and so I think we'll work together with him and do a whole James Dooley image search or image ranking series.
That'd be awesome.
Cool. So I guess with that, we'll call it a show. I want to thank everyone for watching the show. I know this one was a bit more, probably academic and nerdy than our other academic and nerdy shows, but this one will probably take that cake. But we wanted to share it because, testing isn't easy. And this is what we do to try to get you guys the best possible information. And, succeed or fail, I think it's really noteworthy to just point out how much goes into trying to get those insights. And, a lot of times we'll put in all this work and we'll find out, oh, it's not a factor, or, oh, it's inconclusive, and one of the things we often say behind the scenes is the hardest signal to measure by far is no signal at all. You can spend hours and days and weeks trying to measure something that's very faint.
Sure.
And we do. And so we, it's good to point out these pitfalls so you can help avoid them, but it's also good for you to understand what kind of work it actually takes to learn something new about SEO.
Yeah. Plus, I think, to me, like listening to you guys and all your testing that you guys have been doing before, one of the big lessons for me is that even if I failed at setting up a test properly, I learned something as a result of that failure. So, and in being open to different ideas, like Kyle and the three of us, we call us Fight Club because we don't agree on everything, but we, are reasonable enough to talk to each other. Like I might, spike Kyle's drink or something every once in a while, but other than that, we get along just fine. So I think being open to that and knowing that there is plenty of different ways of testing, and you can call anything scientific as long as you document that process, and you have a process to do it. So I think it's cool. I appreciate what you guys are doing with IMG, especially creating that testing software, because that makes testing for everybody obtainable, even if you don't get complex or all you're doing is repeating other people's tests. You're still adding value to yourself. You're still learning something. So that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more, that when you're creating these tests and you're trying to learn new information and you fail, it's not necessarily a failure, because you're absolutely right. You learn that something isn't a factor. Even though you keep seeing people saying it is, you're like, no, it's actually inconclusive. We don't know. Or actually, no, it's not a factor. It's completely the opposite. When you know that information, it's a pretty big game changer.
Well, how many times have you guys taken a failure and found a new factor?
Yeah, absolutely.
All the time. Well, the fun thing too was like when I showed at like Rockstars and the kind of on the circuit, when I did that test and I said, okay, here are the pages, and I used one of my own blog posts to get a quick link going. The related searches that showed up at the bottom for the fake keyword, the related searches were Kyle Roof, Lorem Ipsum, and that's because I was using a blog that I've spoken about that on. And so like, that was really interesting to find, like the related searches are probably attached to the domains or the pages, probably more likely the pages that are ranking for that keyword, not necessarily in a different index. They're attached to those pages that exist, which was a very interesting find. And you don't find that unless you're actually doing these things and playing with it and figuring it out.
Nice.
Yeah. And I love being proven wrong. Like, I know people look at me sideways every time I say that, but I mean, you see what I'm doing. That's hard learning. To learn something new, we're spending at least a week of time and effort to learn that new nugget. And when somebody just comes out of nowhere and says, Ted, you're wrong, here's the proof, and drops it in my lap, I love it. That's free, easy learning. Now, it doesn't happen all that often, but I'm not invested in the outcomes. And when you do testing, it's another way you can mess up, is being too invested in what you want the outcome to be. You just shouldn't care. If it's not a factor, you win, because you are the person on earth who knows it's not a factor. And that's advantage. If it is a factor, you win, because you know yourself that it is a factor. The outcome doesn't matter. It's being true to the method.
Perfect. All right, folks, with that, thank you very much for joining us for episode 43 of SEO Fight Club. If you could, please hit the thumbs up or the thumbs down, whatever. Engagement's engagement. Make sure you hit subscribe and click the little bell notification every time we make a new episode. YouTube was kind enough to send you an email. So appreciate that, and thank you all for watching.
Thanks, everyone.